All right, welcome to the first ever video episode of Liberty on the Rocks. I'm your host, William Gadsden, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Thomas Kilroy. Tom, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, man.
You're doing a lot better after we get into some of this.
Fair enough.
Which is a great segue. The Scotch of the episode is the Glenfiddich 12, and it's only the 12 because we drank all of the 14 American Reserve a couple of days ago, which was, in hindsight, not the best decision. But if you haven't listened to our show before, I can't really help you there. You're going to have to go to the Think Liberty Network on SoundCloud and give them a listen. We've got some great stuff on there, and I'm really excited about moving forward with our video content. I know Tom is too.
Definitely.
So basically, the gist of this show is that we're going to take a general topic and just have a very open discussion about it while we drink some fine spirits. So today we're going to be talking about my recent vacation to Italy. I got to visit Pompeii, and where the hell are you going with this, Will? So basically, what I learned there is very applicable to, I think, a lot of the patterns that we see in the modern day economy. So let's dive in.
Let's do it.
So basically, of course, Pompeii was the ancient Roman city that got blown up and smothered by ash from Mount Vesuvius.
Yeah.
Killed a bunch of people, this and that. But then it was very well preserved, and now we can go and visit this amazing city. It's huge. It's incredibly well preserved. And I got some really amazing insight into what I think is demonstrative of the human ability to adapt to different situations, especially with the economy. So, for example, the Romans were really smart, and I understand that being a student of history, but I had no idea, like all of the sort of modern amenities that we enjoy now, they had their own version of it. Like, dude, they had fast food, right?
Interesting.
So as you're going down, you're walking down these streets, and everything, the first story, top and below, is preserved. You can see staircases, everything. So as you're walking down the street, some of these buildings on either side of you would have these big openings out front, and there would be a rut right at the threshold where they would have a sliding door. And so just inside this sliding door, that's how you know it was a shop, right?
Okay.
So just inside the sliding door, a lot of them had these marble countertops with ceramic pots built into the countertop. And so our guide was telling us that in this really busy, metropolitan city, a lot of people would be going to and from work, maybe they're shopping, whatever the case may be, and they got to grab some quick food. That was their fast food. So they'd roll up to this marble countertop and be like, oh, I want some of that, ladle it out, and they're on their way. But even past that, they had, these the public baths were another really amazing thing that, I'm familiar with them, but honestly, what I thought was it was mostly like in England, how they had kind of this hot mineral bath, and that was it. There's not a whole lot of technological advancement, there. They just stumbled on it and built something around it. But what I learned is that they had pipes to carry water. They understood how to use steam. They had like almost a double layered wall so that the steam could all travel inside the wall and cause the room to be really hot. And then in the meantime, just one room over would be like a cool down room where you could get a massage and all these different things. I mean, dude, the Romans lived it up, man. It's pretty fantastic. So on a little bit of a lighter note, what was one of my favorite aspects of it, because I'm a child at heart, or a teenager at heart, whatever. So Pompeii was a big port city. So you had a lot of trade coming from around the Mediterranean, people from North Africa, people from Greece, a lot of foreign sailors. So you're a foreign sailor that just rolled up on this big city. Where's the first place you're going to go? It's the brothel. Spoiler alert.
Okay, not where I would go, but okay.
Well, I mean, back in the day, there were a lot more fast and loose with those kinds of rules.
Okay.
But but you don't speak the language, or maybe it's late at night or whatever. How are you going to find the brothel, man? Because, dude, you've been at sea for a while.
Well, if you're sloshed, I mean, naturally, you're going to be looking down anyway, so
yeah,
that works out well.
Lo and behold, at your feet, there's a phallic symbol carved into the... I'm not making any of this up.
Yeah.
There's a phallic symbol carved into the stone, and it's pointing in a direction. And so you follow that direction.
You are a child.
and there's another one that's pointing, and so you follow these, and it takes you to the brothel. And then when you get there, still can't find anybody that speaks your language, but there are murals on the walls that are very graphic, and you're like, hey, that's what I want to do. So it was essentially a menu, and they were able to find ways to innovate, to work around these different obstacles in the economy. But what really amazed me, and I'm finally getting to the ultimate point here, is that you had the town square. And so the town square was the social center. Everybody goes there for festivals and parties, and that's where you meet your friends. That's where you do all your shopping.
Okay.
So off of the town square would be all of these different quarters, right? So there would be the meat market, vegetables and whatever over here, fish. And then one corner was specifically for clothing.
I'm just thinking how the 21st century equivalent would be in rural America is just Walmart.
Oh, yeah, it'd be Walmart or, a strip mall if you're lucky.
Meeting in the parking lot.
Yeah, exactly. hey, y'all.
We could go on, but...
Yeah, we probably shouldn't.
Right.
Until we've drank enough to justify it. So, but they had a lot of sheep herds on the other side of the mountain, and so they would gather wool from the sheep, and they would make clothes out of this. So Pompeii was kind of known for this, known for their wool, for their clothing. So in order to get into the quarter of the town mall, if you will, that sold clothing, when you walk into that gate off to the right, there's, for lack of a better term, it's a urinal. So our guide, so check it out. Our guide was telling us that in order to go into the market, you would have to pay the toll. You would have to pee in this urinal, and they collected all of the pee, which sounds really okay. So check it out. So they didn't have readily available chemicals or resources to process the wool. So when you got this raw wool, it's sweaty, it's dirty. They have to process it before they can turn it. They can separate it and turn it into clothes, weave it. So they would use the ammonia in human urine in order to process the wool. So again, this is just one more way that they said, well, we've got a problem. We really want to provide this product to consumers at a low price, but man, if we get this stuff anywhere else, it's going to be really expensive. How can we work around this? Well, it's crude, but let's collect a piss toll before people can go into the wool market.
That is insane.
So, and they were able to provide a quality product for a lower price because, because
they collected local urine.
They collected local urine.
That is amazing.
And just to further prove that the ancient world was no different from ours, the emperor found out about this and he taxed the pee.
How do you even do that? So
he says, I honestly didn't ask. I probably should have in hindsight because I kind of want to know. Pee? I want to know. So the emperor started taxing the pee, which is just one more way of the government in the modern day finding a way to tax innovation in the private sector. So these entrepreneurs have found a way to innovate, to provide a quality product or service for a lower price to the consumer. Everyone wins here. And the government finds a way to step in and tax it. So, there's all kinds of different ways that you could draw parallels between then and now. Look at, some cities have tried to outlaw Airbnbs. Some cities have tried to outlaw Lyft or Uber.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Or at least heavily tax it. Let's put extra taxes on some of these services because the free market has found a way around the obstacles that we've already put in place. I mean, you could go on and on with different examples, but I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So real quick, I also want to talk about one of our friends at Retro Revolution. Drew, have you looked at some of their products?
I have not yet, but it's a nice segue from speaking of taxing goods.
Right. And now we have the internet tax. So thanks, SCOTUS. So Retro Revolution is an online store that has all kinds of classic, very classy products, and they've got some nerd stuff, but everything across the board. They got t-shirts, they got vintage style clothing, watches, straight razors, messenger bags, handbags, all really quality products with deep discounts. And they're constantly adding new merchandise. I've got some of their products myself. I love them. I wear them. I feel like I look good in them. I feel confident.
Cool.
But you should check them out on Facebook at Retro Revolution. Or if for some reason you don't have a Facebook, check them out online at their website, retro-revolution.com. So now that we've gotten the free market side out of the way, I want to expand what we're talking about a little bit more into, well, the Romans didn't have the kind of technology that we do now, obviously. I was talking about further innovating with, Lyft and Uber. We have to have cars for that.
Yeah.
Airbnb, we got to have the internet.
I mean, the Amish would beg to differ, but
well, they get around on their buggies just fine. And actually, I read an article about a Amish boy that was pulled over in his buggy because he was drunk. Which, I mean, I'd like to be a fly on the wall when they let him in the back of the car. But
can you have religious objections to riding in the back of a cop car?
But what would they do at that point? Like, I'm going to commandeer your buggy.
Yes.
I'm taking you down to the station. But what if the cop's never driven a buggy before? Hey, can you show me how to do this? Like, I know I'm taking you in, but dude, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's not like he could call someone in the village to help them. Yeah, right, this is falling apart pretty quickly. Get in the car.
We're not impressing anybody at this point. So, as technology advances, the case I'm making here is that as technology advances, it becomes easier and easier for people to innovate and easier for them to become more involved in the market, become successful. And again, you get into this situation where the entrepreneur or the business owner, the provider and the consumer both win. So you look at after the Roman Empire, you look at the Middle Ages. You had kings and queens and, feudalism. So they've got more direct control over the market. And, some economists even argue that that was a necessity at the time. You've got one overarching guy, a Leviathan or a sovereign, if you will, to borrow Thomas Hobbes, the Hobbesian idea behind it.
Sure.
So he or she or they have oversight over everything. So you got a surplus of crops over here. These guys over here are starving. I'm just going to move that over there. Okay. We didn't have the technology to coordinate that sort of thing at the time. So, maybe it was a necessity, maybe it wasn't. But as we've advanced technologically, we are more free to enable the individual, is basically what I'm getting at here. Even Hayek, F.A. Hayek, talked a little bit about that. So what he made the case that technology isn't inherently good or bad. It's amoral, just like any sort of tool or system. But as technology advances, whichever side has control over that technology is going to become more powerful as technology advances.
Okay.
So I've been talking quite a bit. What are some of your thoughts at this point?
Well, I mean, that makes sense. I'm thinking of just weapons, for instance, if whoever holds the weapon, so for a gun, and that's a huge issue, whatever, today. And what I'm talking about specifically is guns in the hands of able-bodied citizens that aren't out to commit crimes. They're just there for self-defense, target shooting, hunting.
Oh, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I'm thinking mostly in terms of economics, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. If you carry that forward, he who has the power or has the technology has the power. Well, at some point, someone's going to run out of ammunition, and I know there's reloading tables and all of that, but then you bring in whoever is manufacturing the ammunition as well. So now they have a check, right? Or a balance on whoever has the weapons, but then, they can coordinate.
Right. And then more to the point, I'm reading Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell now, and he was just talking about scarcity versus shortages versus monopoly, all these different concepts, basic concepts, but, fundamental stuff that we all need to be reviewing, even if we feel like we got a good handle on it. But anyway, so he was talking about the basic idea of one company or one entity, it could be the government, whatever, having control over production of a product. So, for example, ammunition. So if the government says, well, I'm the only entity that can produce ammunition, like now they've got control and they've essentially disarmed you anyway. So now
well, how many rounds are just going to not work? Is it like
the government's
every fifth round? It reminds me of that story in World War II. I don't know if it was Oscar Schindler or someone else, but just making defective munitions.
Oh yeah.
Was that him or is that somebody else?
It might have been him. So I know he had like factories and he produced things. I don't know if he produced arms or not, but I do know that there was a businessman of some kind that did that. It was basically like it was sabotage.
Yeah. So I think that could basically be guaranteed.
Yeah.
If they seize the means of production.
For sure. Yeah. Then you get into agorism, and it's like, okay, well, I want to. There's always a way around it, and again, that goes full circle back into economics. These people are going to use technology to innovate to get around the obstacles that the government has put in place. But then the government's going to come back around and put another one in place because they got to get their pound of flesh. So it's kind of this.
Ugh, it's really graphic.
Back and forth. Yeah, it's this back and forth tug of war. Between the two sides, but every time the free market finds a way around it. But how great would it be if the government didn't throw those obstacles in the way in the first place? But anyway,
yeah.
So you've got this idea of control. You're vying for control. Are you going to empower the individual, or are you going to empower the government? Or it could be a corporation or whatever. Let's be clear. But
why would someone empower the government? Why would they empower the individual? I mean, what's the benefit? What's their value system?
Well, and that's one of the finer points that it's going to come down to. I think that might be the crux of the whole thing. If somebody has enough trust in the government, which obviously we've talked about before on our other podcasts, they're going to trust that the government has their best. What's the word I'm looking for here?
I mean, interest.
Interests, thank you. Their best interest in mind. And I like to think that people that are a little bit more well-educated, well-rounded, we understand that that's an extremely naive point of view. And the only person or entity that you can really trust to have your best interests at heart is you, the individual. Now, the irony of it is that when people say, well, I'm just going to trust in the government or the collective, the government's going to take from everybody and redistribute it. They're going to take care of it. The
recycle the wealth.
Recycle the
gosh.
The irony is that if you empower the individual, this is something that Thomas Sowell talks about. When you empower the individual, they're going to have their own best interests at heart. But because of that, they end up providing for everybody. Everyone is taking care of everyone else, even though it's not conscious. Because that's how the free market works.
Yeah. How else are you going to accumulate more wealth to fold back into your business? That's the real recirculation of wealth.
Right.
A business owner, a solopreneur, an entrepreneur making profit from a mutually agreed exchange with their customer, then recirculating that back into their business to hire more people, to hire folks to do research and development, to do marketing, advertising, to find a better mousetrap,
Right.
and then get that out into the public. And then you're right, they improve, but then also the public now has a better product because they've been able to innovate incrementally.
But wait, there's more. So this entrepreneur that you spoke of, you know, he created this business, he's created this product.
He or she, right?
Correct. Or
Nope.
no,
Stop.
So they have created this product. They're providing a quality service or a product, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm good. I'm not gonna push anymore. I'm where I want to be."
Yeah.
But now business B just moved in, and they're like, "I'm gonna undercut you. I'm gonna sell a similar product, maybe a similar quality, but I'm gonna sell it for less." So now, what does entrepreneur A do?
Well, they've got multiple options, but they can either wake up and start working again, improve their product. They can rest on their laurels, just kind of hope that it plays out. They can change, they can pivot, do a new product, change their service model. I mean, now this is a topic that you and I were talking about yesterday, but essentially, like, if no borders, everyone can come in. It's going to create an environment where the most innovative succeed at the volume side, just the most product, lower quality, or like Veblen goods, where as the price increases, then people think it's worth more.
Right.
And I think that's going to create more competition, but you reassured me that there is a place within each division on that volume to low quantity, high price continuum.
Right.
So,
well, it's a basic supply and demand.
Yeah, but it's not without its awkward phases of kind of finally realizing where you play yourself out. And I know I harp on that a lot because I don't think leftists or people that are right of center ever address that. And I think that's really imperative to kind of get it out there, that if you're going to make large wholesale changes or incremental, someone's hurt by it. I mean, someone who just doesn't want to innovate, doesn't want to move, doesn't want to do anything, will eventually be realizing, wow, I'm in a bad way right now, and I either need to just kind of sit here, or, well, in our model, there are no handouts for those that don't work. But,
right. Yeah. I mean,
or you can actually just change it up.
Yeah. Well, and that's the next thing that I wanted to touch on, because Dr. Sowell talks about that exact scenario. So inevitably, as technology advances, some people are not going to keep up, whether it's because they're resting on their laurels, they're complacent, or they're lazy, or through no fault of their own, they don't have the capital to invest, whatever the case may be.
And it could be their geography. Maybe they're great in a different area.
There could be a natural monopoly that they just can't break through. There are all of these different things that can and do happen. And he makes the case that, this is going to happen, and it is bad. But that's the natural way of things. It's the natural order of things. And compare that to the alternative, where you have a government-controlled or essentially planned economy. And then, well,
I just can't help but laugh whenever you mention that.
and there's bread lines, and
that's not actually funny. I was just laughing about the inefficiency, but kind of the results of that are definitely not funny.
Yeah, millions of people dead, and you got a guy with a mustache. I mean, Stalin was big, Hitler was little, but either way, it's all the same thing. Yes, I am saying that the Nazis were socialists because they were. So
I don't speak German, but I'm pretty sure socialist is in their title. Is it not?
Yeah, National Socialist Workers' Party. They were
which translates to English.
Yeah. It was an acronym that was pronounced Nazi in German.
Wow.
But anyway, so if you compare the two, if you compare the natural order of things, a handful of people can't keep up, but on the whole, that's a small sacrifice to make for the greater good. I love Hot Fuzz. It's a fantastic movie. Which again is kind of one of those ironic overlaps between just in terms of language. You have this overlap with, communism or collectivism, socialism, whatever form it may take, is
Which totally reminds me.
Yeah.
You were talking about how is democratic socialism actually different
Oh my gosh.
from politics in the 40s?
I'm going to finish my thought here.
Okay. No, I'm just getting excited.
We'll circle back to that because no, that's good. That's good.
Okay.
That's what the show's for. It's for rabbit trails. Oh, damn it. I lost my train of thought. So it's a small price to pay, but you have this overlap. Collectivism is all about the greater good. We're going to take a little bit from everybody so everybody, can succeed or have a higher standard of living or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Obviously, it just doesn't work. And Thomas Sowell and F.A. Hayek both go into all of the reasons why in several of their books. We won't get into all of that right now because we just don't have time. But anyway, I was thinking about the irony of that. But so when it comes to technology, if you can't keep up with the advancement of technology, you will fail, and other businesses will outperform you, and that's okay because again, everyone is enjoying the fruits of that labor. Quality of the good or service is going up, the price is going down, competition is keeping prices down and quality up. We can see all kinds of examples of this in the modern day. Some of our younger audience members might not know what Blockbuster is, but that used to be a thing, and they didn't keep
It
up.
still exists in Alaska, I think.
Are you serious?
I think there are 2 or 3 stores in Alaska because internet is just not good there. And so people go in, Redbox doesn't have a presence there, and so they've got just kind of a revolving
What are you
library.
saying the market provides?
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's incredible,
Yeah.
isn't it? So, well, eventually when they're narrowed down to one, they just need to preserve everything and turn it into a museum. Anyway, you've got Blockbuster. More recently, you've got Toys R Us, rest in peace, because they just couldn't keep up with changes in the market. And
yeah, I read an interesting article on that, and it wasn't. I don't think it was necessarily they couldn't keep up with changes. It was, I think, our country, our culture is obsessed with convenience, and the summation of the article was a majority of toy sales pivoted to Walmart. Okay. So people were already there. You have basically every Walmart is a super center now. I remember, when we were growing up, it was. Some Walmart was a grocery store, some Walmarts. And then they had it to where you could also buy just, no. It was just straight up goods for the home, whatever. And then they added food.
Right.
And so, nowadays you can go, and even in here, we can go down there and it's everything there. So it's just the market did provide, but people aren't going to go out of their way to shop for toys when they can just get their groceries, go down the aisle, walk. The stores are enormous now, and then get their toys there. And I don't think kids generally care about the quality of the toy.
Yeah.
As long as it looks cool.
Forget about it. It's going to break, whatever.
Yeah, which totally lends itself to the manufacturers making more of this really brittle toy.
But
that's
it's
going
cheap
to break.
enough, and people are willing to buy it. So,
Yeah.
Hayek and Sowell.
Supply and demand.
Well, they talk about this sort of communication that is practiced through prices. So basically, everything. Sowell talks about how prices are subjective, or value is subjective.
Yeah.
So what maybe appreciate that.
Is there a specific way that I'm doing this incorrectly?
No, you're good. Right there's good. Thanks, man.
All right.
So what may be worth a certain price to you for a certain product because you put that much value in it.
Right.
And the product is worth more to you than the money that you were giving up for it. And in the same way, to me, I'm not going to separate that amount of money from me for that thing because I put more value in the money than I do the product. But yeah, that's how the free market works. So even then, Toys R Us had options. Do they want to get bought out? Do they want to offer themselves up to get bought? Because those stores, those are pretty freaking big stores. Maybe Walmart buys them out.
Yeah, there was a company that makes the Bratz dolls with the giant insect eyes. Yeah. It's like he watched the Powerpuff Girls and was like, hey, let's actually make that.
Yeah, and it was hugely successful.
Yeah.
Some god-awful reason.
I know.
So he looked at it, and then they went back and forth. It didn't go through. So
Yeah.
I think he just kind of was like,
So the option was there. But that's irrelevant. I mean, either way, the market moved forward, and they didn't keep up. And so now they lost.
Are there any stores that are left, or it's just wholesale, it's all gone?
I honestly don't know. I don't want to talk out of my ass, but I mean, I'm sure they're probably clearing out the last few. Well, Circuit City, man. You know, like I just remember went to the...
Best Buy is not really that different. And I know people are going to hate on me, but it's just consumer electronics.
Yeah.
You have your experts. I guess that's their edge. Home install,
Right.
stereo systems.
Well, broken record here, but Sowell talks about that too. So even if it's a comparable price for a comparable product, they add something that's non... they add extra incentive that's not price, concerning price. So he was using the example for renting, So if we have a shortage we have a lot of apartments or houses and enough people to fill them, but the prices, there's not enough incentive for the people to move in. They're still living with roommates, with their parents, whatever.
Yeah.
So let's add some extra incentive. So first 3 months are rent free. Or you get a gift card, or whatever this thing was. I think this was in the mid '90s.
Okay.
This is so relatively recently. So maybe it was the case, and I'm spitballing here. But let's say it was something non-monetary, like they're offering the expert help. Geek Squad. Circuit City didn't meet that. They didn't have an equivalent.
Well, as far as I know, anyway.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm spitballing.
Sure. Yeah.
But so it's. In all of these different ways, people are innovating, people are finding ways to get around, to get an edge on their competitor. So it's not just a tug of war. Just as we're talking about this, it's forming more in my mind. It's like a three-way tug of war. It's not it's not just, hear me out. It's not just the
7-day chess.
Just back it. It's not just the government, the public sector versus the private sector, these two, leviathans going at each other. It's the producer and another producer and another producer that are all in competition, and the government on the other side. It's always throwing obstacles in their way, which doesn't lend to my tug of war analogy. So now I'm just lost. Anyway, but they're always finding ways to get around it, to get an edge on whoever is getting in their way.
It could still be tug of war if someone was allowed to just like dump oil on the ground or throw.
I think at this point we're just talking about Mario Kart.
Throw bananas. Yeah. That was my next go-to.
And then you use the red shell, and I'm just pissed at you.
You read my mind. Insane.
Anyway, so. Damn it, lost my train of thought. So what did you bring up a second ago that we were going to come full circle?
Well, it's just kind of the realization with Miss Cortez is elected in New York, and all of the rhetoric that it's not actually that the rhetoric says it is completely different, or it's just very much different from, Nazi socialism or Lenin.
Right.
Style Russian
it's
socialism.
It's all coming back to now. So basically, you're talking about her marketing herself as a politician on the idea of democratic socialism. And this should be very familiar to a lot of our viewers with the 0.1% I own tree houses and make over $1 million a year. Our good friend, Senator Bernie Sanders, socialist prick. So
you say that about all your friends?
Oh, well, mostly just him and you, but anyway. But so she's kind of jumping on that bandwagon. Bernie had a huge following among younger voters,
right?
And so I think she was smart enough to give her credit where credit is due. She was smart enough to hop on that bandwagon and make that the centerpiece of her campaign. So she's running on free college, on free housing, on all of these different things.
So something that I've been wondering, is ICE prevalent in New York?
Sure.
Okay.
ICE is, I mean, depends on what you call prevalent, but ICE is present at least just
Okay.
about everywhere. So basically, not to get too long-winded on this, but with all federal law enforcement agencies, they'll have larger offices in larger cities, and then from there they'll have an area of jurisdiction. So maybe they have to drive 2 miles for an investigation, but it's within their region, so they're going to go investigate it. And I don't know, but I assume ICE operates in a similar fashion. I do have a couple of friends that are federal law enforcement officers, and that's how they operate. So I assume ICE is the same way.
Okay, so she has all these stances
Right.
of what she wants to give people, and then there's just talking points about how it's not actually like Russia.
Right. It's not the same as socialism, or it's not communism. So here's the thought I had this morning.
Mm-hmm.
We heard this with the Bernie Sanders campaign. I can't tell you, I could almost say it before they said it. Well, it's not the same as socialism. And I could tell you the exact same arguments that they would lay out before they even did.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it this morning, and if you look at Soviet history, they try to separate democratic socialism from Bolshevism by saying that, the people still have a say in the matter, and they have representation, and they have all these different things. That's what separates it from socialism.
Okay.
But early on, when right after the Civil War in Russia, when the Bolsheviks did take over, the Duma, that's what it was. I was trying to remember what their parliament was called. It was the Duma. So basically, they did have representation. So a Soviet is just a group of workers. Think of it like a union. So the Leningrad Soviet, or pick your city, you get the idea.
Sure.
Or even based on factories. So several factories might get together and say, hey, we're going to form a Soviet together. So from there, they would choose representation in the Duma. And so, they chose their own people. They chose the representation, like democracy. You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
So while Lenin was in power, he believed in at least partial representation among all the different parties. So you had the Bolsheviks, you had the Mensheviks, there were several other groups. There was even a women's rights group at the time that formed their own party in Soviet Russia. And I think that's something that a lot of people overlook because they're focused on Stalin or the later Cold War. They kind of forget about that first decade. So there was representation, at least at first. So the people could choose their leadership. So basically what I'm getting at here is when people say that, democratic socialism isn't the same as socialism or communism in Soviet Russia, but it is. So when it comes down to it, from the economic side, because what they're doing with democratic socialism is they're blending a political model and an economic model. So we already know that the economic model is the same. The government is going to seize either the means of production, or the more kind of modern definition of it is they're just going to take a shitload of money from people.
Yeah.
And then they're going to redistribute it for the good of everybody, and pigs have wings, and I have a fairy godmother. She's actually just down the hall there. Hey,
Sorry.
you can talk to her later. She's actually so, so we already know that the economic model is the same. And I'm making the case here that not only the economic model, but also the political model was the same, at least in the early years. So under democratic socialism, that is in line with Marxist-Leninism. Now, obviously, Lenin had a stroke and then he died, and then Stalin came in and did all of the purges, and that's when it kind of went off the rails. So when people think of Soviet Russia, that's what they have in mind. But I think it's important to address the fact that the original idea of socialism, or of the Soviet Union, did have representation, and it still sucked. So I want to make the case here because somebody might say, well, yeah, that just means that they didn't do it right. It wasn't real socialism. It wasn't real communism, which, God bless, I hear that argument all the time.
I know, and I don't necessarily understand that, because what would they have done differently? Well, would they have given the people more autonomy? Would they give Americans more power, like less seizure of the means of production? Because Miss Cortez doesn't understand farming?
Well, yeah.
So she's not going to dictate to a farmer when to plant and what time of year and use this seed and don't rotate crops. Now there's an enormous famine.
Right, and that's actually exactly what happened.
Oh, I know. Well, in Cambodia or whatever, you know?
God.
It's all the same. Hey, I have absolutely no idea what you do.
Right.
Other than the title and like a passing understanding. Therefore, since I'm an authority and you are subservient to me,
right,
you're going to plant at this time, you're going to blah, blah, blah.
And we see this play out in all sorts of forms of authoritarianism. Dr. Sowell makes the case that it doesn't matter what sort of intent you have going into it, because I really do believe that in some communist countries, as totalitarian or tyrannical as they may have been, at least some of the bureaucrats had good intentions. Yes, we can, overthrow the bourgeoisie and the proletariat is going to rise up and we're going to have this utopia. I think some of them honestly believe that, and they did have good intentions. But Dr. Sowell talks about how, basically, to put it very bluntly, it doesn't matter what the intent was. It only matters what the outcome was. Let's look at the evidence. And obviously, road paved, good intentions, this and that. If 1 million people starve to death, it doesn't matter what your intentions were. Those people are dead now.
So I guess to address that, people in America today, are they saying that they didn't have better intentions, or that they're just not as smart as this American person who's espousing socialism, therefore we'll have better execution? Because that's extremely self-absorbed.
That's a good point to make. And I think it's a mixed bag. So basically, with the people that did have good intentions, that comes down to the fatal conceit, which is what F.A. Hayek talks about in his book titled The Fatal Conceit. So basically,
shocker.
Right. Surprise. So the idea is that these people believe that they're so intelligent and they're so smart. Pol Pot had several degrees in engineering and some other stuff from France. Very well educated. But he was arrogant enough to believe that I know better than all of you. And I'm just going to gloss over the whole free will thing, because ultimately this is what's best for you because I say so. And you'll see in the end.
It's really a God complex.
Now you're down 7 million people. Anyway, I don't want to get too off into the weeds here. But
yes, we do.
That is what this show is for. So with the idea of it wasn't real socialism, or it wasn't real communism. There was a thing called the New Economic Policy that they used I think it was in the 1920s in Soviet Russia. So they won the Civil War in 1922, and then for about the next decade, they had the NEP. And basically what this revolved around was using unbridled capitalism, free market capitalism.
You mean like Hong Kong?
I mean, like Hong Kong or Singapore or Dubai. They used unbridled free market capitalism to get their economy to a certain point to industrialize. And basically, they industrialized faster than any other nation in history because they used free market capitalism.
But I thought that was evil.
Well, so this is when you get into Marxist ideology, doctrine, I should say. So Marx made the case that getting into communism is an evolution of sorts. So you need this kind, and this is another parallel or overlap anyway. So you need this kind of economy. You need capitalism for a little bit, but once you've gotten to a certain point, then you can kind of ascend into socialism, and then you can ascend into communism, and then you have your workers' paradise, your utopia.
Yeah.
So the overlap that I alluded to just a second ago, F.A. Hayek makes the same case, but for free market capitalism. You need feudalism, you need a little bit of a planned, controlled economy, but eventually you get to the point where you don't need government anymore, which is the ultimate point. Full circle, getting all the way back to that. I want to finish my last thought. I know we're getting into the weeds here a lot.
Yeah,
I really have some thoughts about parallels between true communism and anarcho-capitalism.
And that's what. So I do want to hear what you have to say about that, because I'm not sure where you're going with that, but I want to hear.
Sure.
So, but real quick, my point is, even the communists understood that they had to abandon their ideology to get to a certain point, just to pick up their ideology again, and it fell flat. It failed to the tune of over 100 million deaths. Well, it wasn't real communism.
Well, were they? I'm sorry, I'm getting a little heated, but so yeah, it wasn't real communism. Were those not real deaths? I mean, yeah, those are people in another society across borders, buzzword, in different areas.
Right.
But they actually lived and died.
Right.
Because of that social structure and the government structure. Yeah, you didn't see them, and it doesn't necessarily affect your life, but
so we're
it's
gonna
just really annoying.
I want to get into collectivist ideology in a totally different episode, but I want to get into that, but time.
Yeah.
But basically,
which, are we looking good at this point, or where are we?
Oh yeah, we're way good, man. We're way good. So, in short, when you're looking at individualism versus collectivism, and this is something I've talked about on Liberty Bites, our other podcast, they essentially see human life as inferior. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The good of the individual is inferior to the good of the collective. So this is exactly the case.
Wow, but I see the parallel that you...
Right.
Just the complete jump to human life is inconsequential to the life of the collective.
Which is where free market capitalism comes in.
Yeah.
So yeah, you see, we're all getting circular here, or cyclical, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
But so they see, well, this is the attitude that Pol Pot had in the Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. So yeah, if 7 million people have to die, but we save 21 million people, then that's okay. But the problem is that he didn't look at any other alternative. He had a dogmatic belief in Marxism with a little dash of Rousseau in there, and we've talked about that before on the Think Liberty podcast.
Yeah,
I think that was episode 2 of the Philosopher series. But anyway, it's just a totally destructive ideology when the alternative is, however distasteful the idea of greed may be. Let's say capitalism is fueled by greed, fine, but look at how much more collective good capitalism, free market capitalism, has done versus unbridled communism, or even bridled communism or socialism. So, Miss Cortez?
Yeah, she's got a really long name.
Yeah, it's hyphenated.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
I just don't remember what it is.
She's pretty. But her name is okay.
That's up to your interpretation. I'm sure there.
Beauty in the eye of the beholder and all that jazz. But so she's riding that bandwagon, and I think this feeds back into another episode that we need to do about sort of the attitude of communists or of collectivists in general.
Mm-hmm.
How easy it is to buy into that ideology.
Yeah, I think it's where you're coming from in your income bracket, your area of the country, your upbringing, how easily or how difficult it would be to kind of fall into that thinking. I
want to dive into that so bad, but we're not going to.
Yeah.
We're going to.
It doesn't really help you. The part of capitalism that is most intriguing to me
is, if you want to do better, you need to help other people.
Yeah, exactly.
You're forced to. And obviously that's when cronyism is put in check, but that's a fault of government.
Right. Cronyism doesn't exist without government. And does this lead into the parallels you're going to draw between anarcho-capitalism?
No, but
okay, well let's use this as a very, very terrible, not even a segue. But
Okay.
But I want to hear your thoughts on that. Where are we going with that?
Well, so when I hear the actual realization of communism, at least in the intellectuals' mindset that have that ideology, it's essentially that the people are now trained to help each other, that there is no need for government, resources flow from sector to sector without any negative consequences, without an outside power giving them impulse to do that. How is that not anarcho-capitalism in the sense of, okay, well, now we'll have mutually agreed upon exchange for our goods and money. There is not an overarching government structure that seizes assets from that. People are fine with it. Inevitably, you're going to have pockets of communities where, okay, well, this person is really good at being a bricklayer. They're an expert. Okay, well, I want to know how to do that. I'm going to move there. I'm going to learn how to do that and then spread my knowledge elsewhere, because sometimes the student overpasses the master, other times they don't.
Sure.
But you can take your knowledge to a different part of the country.
And those people have benefited regardless of whether or not you were better than the person that taught you, because the alternative is that they don't learn at all.
So I guess that's my misunderstanding is, how is the ultimate realization of communism not actually a capitalist ideology? Is there just no money involved and people are just like, here, take our stuff, we're on a straight barter system?
So that's a really good question, and it's a very complicated answer. So it really comes down to which, I guess, form of collectivism you're looking at. So with Marxist ideology, in the Communist Manifesto, Marx and Engels write about how, in the workers' paradise, I'm going to get the order wrong, but essentially he says we're going to, fish in the morning, and then we're going to have breakfast, and we're going to go to the factory and work. We're going to work a little bit, and then we're going to debate politics at lunch, and then we're going to go hunting. And then in the evening, we're going to read by candlelight or whatever.
Yeah, and these are all ideologies of a cis white male, right? Not to get into identity politics.
Dear God,
but
you're real. These are all totally separate
just
episodes.
stoking the
Stop
fire.
it, Tom. Stop it. So I'm. Damn.
Okay, so there's the order. You do all of these
Right.
things.
So, but basically, the point is that all of those activities are absent of any sort of money. There's no currency there. It's just, everybody does a little bit.
Okay.
You do a little bit of work, but then the rest of it is just all things that you want to do. Doesn't that sound great?
Yeah, I know. And
But
I said that sounds great. But
Doesn't that sound great?
Yeah.
But so really the main pivot point here is between the two, you're looking at a centrally planned economy versus an economy that doesn't have any planning. And it's a bit counterintuitive, right? Because you think, well, but we need people to control things and direct things and coordinate. No, we don't. Because, and Dr. Sowell uses several references to writings from Soviet bureaucrats.
okay.
Because they're trying to coordinate, just in the housing sector, for example, 20 million different transactions, making sure all of these people just in this one area that I'm in charge of, making sure all of them have proper housing for one or a handful of guys. They're supposed to coordinate all of that. So the alternative being, you don't have a centrally planned or centrally controlled economy. And instead, in an abstract sense, every individual is their own bureaucrat, right? So instead of leaving it to one person or one handful of people, each person is deciding for themselves. And this is why it's counterintuitive, because, that's chaos. Well, no, it's not, because you got consensual transactions, between two people, and those two people, again, know what is best for themselves. So why do you need government to get in the way of that?
Well, I think government is actually, what's the best word for this? It's not prejudice, maybe classist and elitist. I mean, if you think about it, the whole point of social welfare programs in terms of Social Security, Medicare, it's that people aren't intelligent enough to budget for themselves, which is extremely insulting. Is it not?
Of course it is. Well, look at Social Security. Like,
I don't want to, but okay.
Well, I don't want to either. But so, and this is my interpretation. But basically, I see it as FDR coming down and saying, well, you're not responsible enough to save up for retirement, or even with the Affordable Care Act, which is not affordable or caring. Anyway. So
I guess it's an act.
It's, yeah, okay.
1 out of 3.
That's fine. We'll give it to him. Even then, it's, well, you're not responsible enough to decide what sort of insurance you need or what sort of health care you need or whether or not you want insurance in the first place. We're going to decide for you. And our decision is that you do need it and you will get it, or we're going to penalize you and take more money out of your wallet. The Social Security Administration is no different. We are going to take money from you by force, and we're going to put it in this vault over here for you. And when you retire, it's all going to be there. Spoiler alert, it's not going to actually be there because they treat it like a slush fund. Right, there you go. It's the greatest Ponzi scheme of all time. But the idea is that you as an individual don't know what's best for you. You are not responsible enough to take care of yourself.
Extremely insulting.
Of course. And so we're going to do it for you. And it's just a little sprinkle of the fatal conceit is the way I see it.
Okay, that makes sense to me. But this is almost a rhetorical question. How does telling other people we don't believe you're intelligent enough to make financial decisions or healthcare related decisions for your life, so we're going to make it for you, how does that instill personal responsibility? How does that instill confidence, long-term planning? We talk about federal education and how, well, atrocious it is compared to a lot of private education. But even at that small level, that's not even a good education system fiscally.
Right.
Or in terms of their healthcare. And so if the government wants to seize all of that future planning for you, I'm kind of being investigative in this right now. How does that actually benefit them?
Well,
Are they keeping you alive longer to like put money into the system? Oh well, no, they have your best interest at heart.
Right.
They really want you to be okay.
Well, I'm not going to get Alex Jones or anything.
No, I'm not at all. But
the frickin' frog's gay.
No.
I'm not at all. But there is no altruism, I don't think,
of course not.
with government.
No. So there, and again, this comes back to the whole, well, it doesn't matter what your intentions were. Maybe you are benevolent, but
let's look at what happened.
Let's look at
is really all that matters here. So when it comes to things like Social Security, they collect all of this money, they put it in essentially a giant bank, and then all of the interest that is accrued, they skim that off the top. That's for the government, because we did a service for you. Fuck off. You can censor that in post, right? All right.
Consider it done.
I appreciate that. So anyway, but on top of that, that's not enough. So they use it as a slush fund. Well, yeah, we're just going to pull from Social Security because we need more money, because politics. Because when it comes down to it, it's always easier to spend someone else's money than it is your own. This is another concept that Dr. Sowell distilled.
Yeah, I think our president understands that pretty well too, with his investments in real estate.
Yeah. Well, President Obama loved it's somebody else's money. It's fine. Let's redistribute it. Let's do this, that. And to be very clear, I don't agree with any president doing it. I think we need to get it down to the bare minimum. I think President Trump has made some good steps towards that, with the tax bill. People are opening up their paychecks and they're going, hey, that's bigger than I remember. I got more of what I earned in my pocket. And of course, that's one of the main tenets of libertarianism.
And I hope they check their calendar and they're like, Wow.
That's weird.
Yeah, President Obama, his term ended a little while ago. This is not his policy.
This is new. Weird.
Interesting.
Anyway, but let's get back to the technology side of this.
Yeah.
And I want to dive a little bit more into what F.A. Hayek talks about in The Road to Serfdom. So basically, he makes the case that it's I alluded to it earlier, it's an evolution of sorts. So yeah, we need government when we can't handle it ourselves. We need a little bit of central planning. We need a little bit of control. But as the individual is further empowered by technology, we come further and further out of that. So eventually, look at it like like you got a set point on a spectrum, and we're slowly becoming more and more independent. And eventually we're going to pass that point where we need government for anything. And at that point, we're losing money, So at that point, they're a leech on the system. So I'm not saying that we've come to that point yet, but I am saying that as technology advances, we are getting closer and closer to it, to the point where, hey, man, we don't need you for economic purposes anymore. Hey, maybe maintain a military, common defense, all that kind of thing. But we don't need you to take money out of our paycheck.
That's something I noticed about the government shutdown. I wondered how many folks in Washington were like, we can't let this keep going on. Like, we need to actually do something, because eventually they'll realize that the amount of time that we're spending is not even the core 4 hours of work that the average American worker is productive. It's way less than that.
I mean, obviously, it's incredibly nuanced, but I think that is part of it, And it's also, there's the political angle where we have to look like we're doing something.
Yeah.
But I mean, since you brought it up, there's the whole point that the government doesn't actually shut down. It's like less than 10% stops. So public parks, national parks, all that sort of thing, they stop going to work, and they just put up, crowd control barriers or whatever, fences, what have you, which ends up costing more money. Anyway, it doesn't make any sense. But so it's not actually a shutdown, is my point.
Frustrating.
But it's a chess move. So whoever is shutting down the government, whether it is the Democrats or the Republicans, they get to point at the other side and say that, yeah, look at what they did because they're not cooperating. And we had to shut the government down because they're not meeting us halfway. And both sides do it. It's two sides of the same authoritarian coin. And again, that's a totally separate discussion. But it's also a power play, So it's several different things morphing into a terrible decision that the average American individual shouldn't worry about. But of course, there's sensationalism.
Yeah.
There's fear mongering. There's all of these different things. But to come back to the technological aspect of this, the main subject. As technology advances, we become more and more independent from government. So I don't need you to provide a retirement for me. I can do that myself. Now, granted, they could have done that 100 years ago, before Social Security was set up. They could have done it then, but it's become far easier now. I can go online on my smartphone and I can create an allotment with my bank, So however big or small the amount is, they can set up an allotment out of each paycheck that goes into a retirement fund. And to be fair, let's say I don't make a whole lot of extra money.
But you were smart enough to do that?
Oh, I guess I was. It's almost like I'm an individual person with an individual brain.
But you shouldn't have the ability,
responsible decisions or irresponsible decisions,
nor the right to do that. I mean,
you didn't even say it,
No,
because there is no point to that.
No, there's really not.
Let people make decisions. Let them govern their own autonomy with their money,
right? And then
put whatever they want.
This is where we get to the sticking point where it's like I say, well, if you weren't responsible enough to take care of yourself, sorry, bud, see you later. But
and I think the important distinction to that at least in the understated relation to religion and charities and nonprofits. The role of government to me has nothing to do with helping people monetarily. That if someone's down on their luck, if something happens to them, there should be a good or service that is provided through, you can fund it through interest gains on the market or however that plays out. But there should be religious organizations, churches, synagogues, other collectives where they actually come together and say, hey, these people are in dire need because of such and such circumstance. We need to help them.
Well,
and then it's up to well, why did they get into that? Okay, well, let's figure it out. Let's get to the bottom of it.
Maybe they don't.
Maybe there's just absolutely, yeah.
And that's when you get into altruism. So not to split hairs, but I'm going to split hairs. You say there should be, and I think that's. I'm not throwing under the bus.
No.
There will be. I mean, look at multiple studies over.
Because there will be a demand for that good or service.
Yeah,
therefore,
of course, and
eventually, after the awkward transition.
Right. Well, not even the awkward transition. We see that now. So,
but it's not as powerful as it could be. Is my
point.
Of
course not. It's not. But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's already present, right? So it's not there should be, there is right now. We are far and away far more generous when it comes to charity as Americans than any other country in the world. I mean, it's not even close.
Yeah, and I think the average giver in the ratio of their income is right of center and actually not terribly wealthy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's the follow-up point I was going to make is it's across the entire economic spectrum. It's not just athletes and actors and actresses, that are giving their money. The super rich, the 1/10 of 1%. No, it's everybody.
The virtue signaling. Right?
Yeah, it's everybody. And that's when you get into a little bit more of the nuance. It's like, well, in a sense, that's also supply and demand.
What is?
It's, well, I want to feel good about myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not altruistic, but who cares? The outcome is
Let's
the same.
look at the outcome.
Let's look at the outcome. The outcome is the same. Someone that, for whatever reason, and it really doesn't matter, wasn't able to help themselves. Other people are stepping in and taking care of that. And as technology advances, that becomes easier and easier for the individual. So this is something we've talked about with our dear friend Winston. You've got individuals that belong to all of these different groups, whatever they choose to align themselves with, whether it be religious or even ethnic or gender related, all of these different things. They are giving of themselves, of their own earnings, voluntarily to these groups to benefit other people. So who cares if, well, yeah, but I don't like that it's based on this, that, or the other. The outcome is the same. People are being helped that otherwise would not have been helped.
So why is that I'm rabbit trailing again, but why is that even a sticking point if you care why they're doing it?
Because they're stuck on the intent, not the outcome. I know that
really doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. Well, in our minds it doesn't, but in their minds it's very important. Well, if I'm trying to do the right thing, then it doesn't matter what the outcome is. Again, I'm simplifying.
That's crazy.
But that's what it comes down to. If you distill it down to its basic parts, that's what it comes down to.
Well, I'm not here to shame anybody.
No, of course not.
If you try hard enough with good intentions and things come out bad, depending on what it is, okay, well, try again.
Yeah.
But if you refuse to,
unless it's communism, then don't try again.
Well,
do something else.
Even in that,
people want to try that on a small scale. But if they refuse to have an iterative model, okay, we've got this, it didn't work, let's examine why, let's have changes. If you are just completely stuck in saying, well, this is the only thing, like Pol Pot, like exactly what you said, he didn't consider any other options. It was just the fatal conceit. Nope, I'm smarter than you, this is what we're gonna do. If you continue down that road, then who cares about your intentions?
Right.
At that point, it is literally the definition of insanity.
Yep.
You're doing the exact same thing.
Well, and I think it's interesting. In one of my recent poli-sci classes, we watched a movie that was about the Khmer Rouge and the Cambodian genocide. The missing, I think it was the missing picture. Just the most depressing thing I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I remember I told you about it off camera, but horribly depressing. But it was, so we would watch the movie and then we would have a discussion on it.
Okay.
So I was making the case, because of course I was, to my professor, that the free market would have provided for all of the shortages and the scarcities that were in place at the time that they were responding to, without 7 million people dying, starving to death, or being tortured, or this, that, and the other, because they dove into
everyone with
Marxist
glasses.
philosophy.
If you wear them, you're dead.
Right, and that's anyway.
But that's a fact. I think people are going to be like, "Oh, he's an idiot." No, that was legitimately what they did.
Yeah, that was the thing.
There were so many legally blind people during that time because they just took off their glasses and they're like, "I guess I don't need to see."
Right. Or I'm too well educated, so I'm going to get killed. Same thing with Mao's Great Leap Forward.
Yeah.
Or the cultural whatever it was
revolution.
Called. There you go.
Yeah.
But so anyway, I made the point that, well, if they had free market capitalism, then all of those things would have been taken care of. All of those needs would have been met. Imagine what we could do in our country with our natural resources, with our culture, with free market capitalism. And then he makes the case, well, yeah, but what about this, and this? And these people still starved, and there's homeless people, and this and that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, we don't practice free market capitalism. We practice crony capitalism. And he made a fair argument.
Corporatism.
He said, well, isn't that the same argument as saying it wasn't real communism? And at the time, I didn't know how to respond to it, so I was just kind of like, oh, okay, that's a fair point. But since then, having thought about it, and it's one of those cases where you're in an argument or you're in a fight, and then you storm out of the room and you're like, damn it, I should have said this other thing. That would have been awesome. Get that good jab in there. It was the same thing.
Okay.
So afterwards, I thought, well, yeah, but your version, not him specifically, but other people's versions of not real communism have killed millions of people, and not real capitalism has boosted millions of people out of abject poverty internationally.
Yeah. Something my buddy says pretty consistently is it's very easy to coach after the play.
Yeah. Armchair generals. Yeah.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
Hindsight and whatnot.
Monday morning, I don't sports. So I don't know what the term is. Quarterbacking, Monday morning quarterbacking.
Okay.
We just lost like half of our audience with that alone.
That and the plane in the background that'll have to try to pull out and post.
Gosh, I really hope you can do that.
I'll still leave it there a little bit so they know it's there.
Yeah, just so you're not talking out of your ass. And people are like, what is he talking about?
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
I mean, you are an audio wizard, but I'll give
We'll
you that.
see. We'll see what we do.
So let's talk about technology. I want to talk about...
Not sports, okay.
Not sports, because I don't sports. I want to talk about how technology in more recent history, let's say the past 3 decades, for example, have exponentially boosted not only the economic power of the individual, but the liberty of the individual, the reach that the individual can have, the extent to which technology has allowed the individual to express themselves, to protect themselves, to, all of these different things. And obviously a lot of this is going to hinge around the internet.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing that comes to mind. I mean,
so I guess the biggest innovation initially was, Pony Express, the telegram, the ability to relay messages quickly. Spot me, man.
I shouldn't, but I'm going to.
And then, evolved to telephone and other communication devices. I think communication really is, and the speed with which it can disseminate.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
Throughout is kind of the key, because we've got all kind of streaming services where we can watch old world shows or themed environments. And it was really, hey, go tell the torturer not to actually hurt that kid.
Right.
Okay, yeah, we'll get there. Oh,
In like 3 days.
He already did it.
And he's dead.
And he was on the other side of the castle,
Right. Yeah. Well, the plague got in the way. But yeah.
But I think that's really where the root of empowering the individual to be autonomous without government, even in a business standpoint, is ease and speed of communication. And how easily understood it can be. Because we can talk about next day shipping with Amazon or whatever else, but if you are not able to relay those messages, who cares how quickly the package can get there?
Well, yeah, I think that's a good point to make. I think the distinction would be when you've got something like Amazon Prime, well, that's just an edge on their competitors.
Mm-hmm.
This is something I've talked about with Liberty Bites, using the USPS, the U.S. Postal Service, versus FedEx or UPS or Amazon or any of those other businesses or outlets.
Mm-hmm.
That's an extra edge. But I'm talking about like monumental leaps in exponentially increasing the power of the individual. So, and it does come down to communication. I absolutely agree. When you're in kindergarten, you play the telephone game, right?
Yeah.
So we've all done this, but let's play it out. You start on one end and then 10 people down, it's something just completely different from what you started with.
Yeah, and that depends on whoever is relaying the message.
Sure. And everything gets lost in translation. But if you can cut out all of those middle persons, then,
Z,
then you've got a direct connection between two individuals. And Hayek talks about how a free market allows for a sort of form of communication through the market economy, through a free market economy. But more to the point, with the internet, okay? And gosh, man, I mean, the examples are absolutely endless. We talked about Uber and Lyft and Airbnb, but I mean, let's talk about Edward Snowden. The anniversary of his release of those documents about PRISM just passed us. But, this is a guy that he's one person working for an enormous, military security-oriented complex. And as an individual, he was able to release all of this information. I don't totally agree with everything that he released. I think he opened Pandora's box to an extent. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's focus on the point where he said, hey, your Fourth Amendment rights are being violated by the government, and they're not telling you. You have no idea. I am telling you as one person, and I'm standing up against this enormously powerful entity.
Yeah.
If this was even 50 years ago, he would have been put up against a wall and shot. That's power, and that wouldn't be available. That wouldn't be a capability that he had without the internet. To use a pointed example.
Well, but I guess the other side of that coin is they wouldn't be able to collect that kind of information without the internet.
That's a really, really good point. And that lends back to what
So technology, whoever wields technology has the authority and has the power. Yeah.
Absolutely. Very nice segue. Was that intentional?
Not at all.
Give yourself some credit. Come on, man.
I mean, sure.
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, no, absolutely, man. And that's actually kind of blowing my mind a little bit right now, the connection there. We already know that Hayek was a genius. Hayek was Bay. But
good gracious.
Vinny's clapping right now. Just let it happen. But so as technology advances further, look at talking about mind blowing. Look at 20 or 30 years ago, nobody knew, let's say 40, just to be safe. Nobody knew what the internet was. Nobody
was
knew.
Al Gore born 40 years ago?
Right. So nobody knew what it was going to be. We had sci-fi authors that had kind of, poked around it a little bit. Even Tesla, he talked about newspapers being transmitted wirelessly, things like that. It was a general idea, but nobody knew what would come to fruition of that. And now I can send an email to my congressman. I can send an email to President Trump if I want to. I can talk trash about Putin or Kim Jong-un or whatever. I have the power to do that. And in the same way, tying it back into the economy, information is a form of currency. If you think about it, if I
is this riding the train of knowledge is power, or I guess where are you going with this?
I actually didn't have that in mind, and I think that's because I'm feeling it pretty good. But
well, where is your mind taking you, sir?
So basically, what I'm saying is it's power, and power is currency. I think we can agree on that. So from there, it's a question of, in a free market of ideas, if my points have validity, then I will be listened to. And if I'm just some jackass spouting off at the mouth, then I won't be. And that's where merit comes into play. And merit's kind of the key of the free market, isn't it? But
yeah, everyone has a right to speak, but that doesn't mean you need to be listened to.
It doesn't mean you have a right to be listened to. Yeah. You don't have
a right. Yeah, that's a good. That's a very important distinction.
Yeah, extremely. And we've come across another conversation that we're going to have in a future episode now. But none of that would be possible without technology. Just think about that for a second. I'm gonna channel my inner Joe Rogan and man, just think about that. It's crazy, isn't it? So what's next? What sort of technological advancements are we going to have in the future?
I think it's going to be transportation after that. I've been digging pretty deeply in instant transmission of particles, quantum entanglement. And no, I'm not a physicist, and no, I don't completely understand it. But, they're able to tell, in England, I think it is, they were able to instantly transmit kind of a rogue electron, or maybe it was a photon of light, from one point to another, and it was multiple kilometers away.
I had no idea.
Yeah, this has been a little while from now.
Like an idiot.
Sorry, but
I thought I kept up with things.
Yeah, so they have on an extremely micro level teleportation of at least energy.
That's crazy.
And where it's measurable. So I think that'll be the next invention. I was doing research in communication through quantum entanglement, because my elementary understanding of it, which I did a little bit more digging, is not really what it is. But what I understood is you can have two particles that have a rogue electron or just an electron. And when they're entangled, when you change one, the other's direction changes as well, regardless of distance. So I thought you could have binary communication or even Morse code at one point. So if you entangle two particles and you're able to measure them and look at it, if I change this one, well, now that one's changing. So you would just have readers on that. You can go way out into distant space and you'd have instant communication. But unfortunately, okay, it is true that when you change it, it's that. But, but there's some kind of chaos theory to where it's not exactly consistent. But once they get that figured out, we should be able to have instant communication in any area of the world or of the universe.
Which is completely insane.
Yeah.
Well, basically my ultimate point is, you had people like Ray Bradbury, writing about things that sounded like the internet.
Yeah. Or
that sounded like what you're talking about, like instant communication across light years.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
But Tesla, even further back than Ray Bradbury. We have achieved that level of technology. So, and in a very short span of time compared to the rest of history, when you're looking at technological.
Yeah, it really is a hockey stick.
Yeah. So what is in the future? And I think the answer to that is we have no idea.
Yeah.
So if we have come this far already, we have empowered the individual so much already. And you made the excellent point that at the same time, we could also be empowering, the public sector, the government, or people that don't have our best interests at heart, or do, but the outcome is, bad.
Yeah, subtle creeping regulation is a lot more powerful than I think we can even understand right now.
Are you alluding to a certain amphibian inside of a piece of cookware?
Yes, I did reference that before. And
you did. Well, for our audience that hasn't listened to all of our podcasts, and I know they will.
Yeah.
But for the shorthand.
Yeah, if you're in an environment, there's a saying, and I think it's true in complete application. I've never needed to have frog legs.
They're not bad.
Cool.
I know tastes like chicken is kind of the idiom.
Tastes like meat.
It does taste like chicken.
Okay, so basically, you if you're gigging for frogs and you get them and you put them in water, if you slowly increase the temperature over time, they'll boil and die. Because they have the ability to jump out. I think with lobsters, you can just maybe crank it all the way and dump them in and they die. But
all the serotonin.
Oh gosh.
I love you, Jordan Peterson.
With frogs, it's kind of our current state of everything is there's slow incremental change with government, regulation on the free market, on our wills. I mean, that's what's interesting to me about this whole issue with us. I'm glad that we have technology that we're able to record this and have some small level of mastery over it and then just get it out into the world. But it very well could be that we look back at some point and say a lot of what we're saying now, although it's fairly polite, could be considered, I hate speech. The phrase, but it could be something where it's not okay.
Right.
That
it's wrong thing
that our rights are taken away.
Dangerously close to. But anyway.
But how did we get here?
Yeah.
Was it overnight? Was it and obviously not, because in order to say, well, where were we? You'd have to go back decades in order to say, well, now we have reached this point. And so something that I've been intrigued with is people that rally and cry and say we need instant, insane, progressive change on either side of the aisle. That is not how any of this works.
Right.
It is slow. It's a battle of wits and unfortunately laws and regulation.
Right.
Let's take the Supreme Court, for instance. Justice Kennedy stepping down. People are really up in arms with that because we've given the Supreme Court too much authority.
Which I did a Liberty Bites episode about that.
Exactly.
Yeah, damn these rabbit trails, man. Like I want to talk about it, but we are running short on time. I think what it comes down to is we've got this enormous amount of technological advancement, which can and will empower the individual.
Yeah, technology is not evil.
No, of course.
Money is not evil.
It's amoral, just like Hayek talks about.
The phrase is not money is the root of all evil. The phrase is the love of money.
Right. It all comes down to human nature. What is humanity going to do with it?
So the free market needs to incentivize mutually agreed transactions to help other people through products and services.
Right.
So if you love money and you are, by definition, the root of all evil, you now are forced to help other people in order to get what you want.
Because of how the market works. So it
I don't
doesn't
understand
matter what
how
your
folks
intentions
don't.
are. So maybe you're maybe you are what certain politicians and their followers think. Well, you're rich. That means you're evil. Let's play that out. Let's play
How
that
many
scenario.
of them?
Let's say you are actually evil, but you're wealthy and you want to continue to be wealthy. You're going to inevitably benefit other people, even if whether you want to or not. If you want to continue to be greedy and you want to continue to benefit yourself, then you are going to help other people in the process of doing that. You're going to continue to pay people. If you want to keep them in your employ, you are going to have to give them additional incentives, or else they leave and you have to downsize your business and you make less money. So again, on the flip side of that, even if your intentions are not good, they're bad, the outcome is really what gives you the measure of whether or not that policy is efficient and effective. I think that's another key point that we can talk about it at another time. But just like Hayek said, as technology advances, those things are going to become stronger. Wherever that control goes, whichever part of the multi tug of war, rope,
Sure.
wherever that control is going, that group or person or people is going to have that amount of power over everybody else. So let's make sure that it's going to go to the place that will benefit the most people, not by intention, but by outcome. And so as technology advances, when we get another 30 years into the future, as you look at the rate at which we have advanced technologically, it's getting faster and faster and faster. So what we've accomplished as far as advancement in the last 30 years, we will accomplish the same amount in 10 years. We have no idea what kind of technology we're going to have in the next decade. Isn't that insane? That's crazy. But we have to keep in mind that as that technology advances, there is power that comes along with that. Where is that power going to go? And that's up to us as individuals.
Well, I have certainly become more liberty-centered
with this
As have I, my
this
friend.
discussion.
So I think that's a good closing point, and we're actually right on time. So
excellent.
to our audience, I hope you have enjoyed the first video episode of Liberty on the Rocks. I am your host, William Gadsden, and this is my co-host, Thomas Kilroy. Thanks for joining us, and I hope you've become more liberty-centered with us. And check out Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, wherever your favorite social media outlet is. We're on all of them. Check out the Think Liberty Network on SoundCloud or iTunes. And check out our merch store on our website at think-liberty.com. So I hope you'll join us next time. We've had a good time. Have you had a good time?
Excellent. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you didn't, it's probably because you're a communist and you hate America. If you want to see more of Think Liberty's content, check us out at think-liberty.com or Think Liberty on whatever social media website you prefer. Be sure and check out our merch store as well for some sweet Liberty swag.